Lion-O comes face to face with Mumm Ra for the very first time in this series, leading to a shocking revelation about a traitor among the Thundercats. We're going to talk about it right here in the end of the first arc for Thundercats number 4 from Dynamite Comics. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. Let's talk about what happened in issue number 3 before we jump into this issue. Lion-O's rush to lead the Thundercats doesn't sit well with Panthro, and the two of them start to butt heads pretty vigorously. Eventually, it comes to blows. Chitara steps in and says, "That's enough of that. I have to defend my king against Panthro. Even though you're supposed to all be allies and friends, we've got to settle this, and we're going to do it in the traditional way, which is one-on-one, person-to-person combat." And Chitara steps in to be Lion-O's defender or champion, if you will. The fight goes as expected, and Chitara wins. That forces Panthro to kind of reassess his loyalty and to understand that even though he may not agree with the king, he still has to respect the king, whether he's a mentor or not, and that forces him to start to see Lion-O in a less childish light. Meanwhile, Snarf has now made an entrance into the series, and he comes out of a pocket dimension where all kinds of weaponry and Thunderian artifacts are stored. And Snarf here is different than the cartoon, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. That brings us to Thundercats number 8, where we find Panthro, who's tinkering in the lab inside the ship that is now grounded on Third Earth. Wily Cat is pestering him with annoying questions, and he's not having it, but he does explain that he's building something that's necessary for the defense of the Thundercats. Meanwhile, Lion-O is out getting some fresh air, and he's spending some quality time with Tigra, and he's expressing some real honest emotions about what he's feeling, how he's dealing with conflicts, and how he's trying to kind of wrestle with his new status quo. And at the same time, Tigra immediately gets what's going on with Lion-O and says, if you've got feelings for Calica, you need to pursue them because you're only young once, so you might as well go ahead. And before the conversation proceeds any further, Tigra spots something on the horizon. Cut back to Panthro, who is still working around his lab and building something unique or interesting that he's not ready to share. Wily Cat's nowhere to be found. Then he's approached by Calica, who is trying to butter him up a little bit and say, "Look, I'm here. I'm with the Thundercats. I want to swear my allegiance to you because you're royalty. You're all about the Thunderian way of life. Let me join you and just be a member of the team and the family and what have you." And before the conversation goes any further, all of a sudden Panthro he receives an alert about something bad happening outside, and he races off and he tells Calica, "You stay here, don't touch anything, don't do anything, we'll be back." Elsewhere, we catch up with Slythe. Remember, in the last issue, he was captured by some unknown individuals and tied up and trussed up like a Christmas goose. Now we find out who they are. They are mutants who are native to Third Earth, and in particular, they are Monkians. And Lord Monkian says, "Hey, you may have been a top dog mutant back on Thundera or wherever you came from. Here, you are not. We don't recognize your role or your title as Lord of the Mutants, but recognize that we may have some common enemies. So it's better that we work together and tie him, and a new alliance is formed." Back to the Thundercats, now that the alarm has fully sounded. They're all assembled. They're ready to fight. They're in their action poses. And what do they see? They see a large crowd of reptilians like Slythe, but these are different. They look like they're dead, undead, zombified, and they're all wrapped in cloaks and mummy-like bandages. And they leap to the attack, and so the fight starts. And it seems like everything is going pretty well. The Thundercats are taking out these undead reptilians as best as they can, and then suddenly somebody calls out Lion-O's name, and he looks to see a new enemy has entered the battlefield, and it's Mumm Ra, which is their first meeting in this version of the story. Mumm Ra starts shooting out energy blasts from his hands. One of them hits Tigra and wounds him pretty badly. Chitara races in to pick up Tigra. She gets knocked down as well, and things are starting to tip the other direction, where it looks like the Thundercats have the upper hand. Now it's sliding in the other direction. Lion-O says, "I may not have the Sword of Omens and the Eye of Thundera because it's still broken and back at the base, but I've got a sword, I've got my fighting skills, I know how to use all of them. You guys get some distance, get out of here. Chitara, take Tigra, get back to the base, get him some healing. Wily Cat, give him some cover. I'm going to take care of this new bandaged guy, whoever he is." The fight goes pretty well for Lion-O, even though he doesn't have all his weapons at his disposal, but suddenly both Mumm Ra and Lion-O feel like their power is slipping away. Something's draining their power, and that gives the reptilian zombified soldiers of Mumm Ra to attack and overwhelm Lion-O. So he's pretty much done for at this point. And all of a sudden, the ground starts shaking and rumbling. And what do we see? Panthro charges into the rescue in the Thunder Tank, which is what he's been working on in the lab. So he snatches up Lion-O and they drive away to retreat, and they reassemble back at the base to regroup and consider their next steps. Tiger's still hurt, but they're watching out for him, and then we got to figure out what to do from there. Also, unfortunately, they find that Snarf has been injured and the eye of Thundera is now missing. Let's switch over to the technical aspects, starting with the character work. There are 3 main character points that are important in this issue that come out loud and clear. First, Lion-O learns a very painful lesson about trust and betrayal and what that means, which is all part of growing up. So even though his body's matured, his mind and his emotions haven't, and he learns a very hard lesson that day, and that hopefully will inform and help him mature and make him a better leader. Second, Panthro takes the beating he got in last issue to heart, and he takes a step back and recognizes that even though he doesn't agree with this king, that he still has to respect this king, and he's there to support Lion-O in his strange accelerated maturity levels. And so he has a less adversarial conclusion about how that whole situation played out. Third, now we have a new alliance between Slithe and Monkian, which, if you're a fan of the OG cartoons and the source material, you know is bad news for all the Thundercats. So a lot of character work and relationship building is going on here that informs what happens going forward. Let's switch over to the art and talk about Drew Moss. We've been, I would say, admittedly, a little hard on Drew Moss because his art style tends to be a little bit blocky and not particularly dynamic. But in this issue, it's a bit better. It's noticeable that there is a little bit more curvature, a little bit more sleekness to the character designs, a little bit more energy in the fights. It's not fantastic, won't blow you away, but there is, I would say, a noticeable improvement. Moving over to pacing and structure, that's where this issue unfortunately suffers. You get that one action scene, which is the fight between the Thundercats and Mumm Ra and his zombified reptilian forces, and that's about it. The rest of the issue is just people standing around talking, people standing around expressing their feelings about situations or what they think about what's going on. So it's a very talk-heavy Thundercats issue, which it almost seems like an anathema. It shouldn't. This is Thundercats. This is action adventure in its purest, simplest, kind of action figure toy form, and it's mostly people just standing around talking. So although the relationship building, the character building is nice to kind of build out a level of maturity and some emotional depth to their characters and the relationships, but on the other side, this is a Thundercats comic, and a Thundercats comic at no point ever should feel dull or like you're checking out. And unfortunately, you get some of that here, and that's a big miss on Declan Shelby's part. Let's switch gears to talk about the themes. The big theme of this issue is trust. Panthro has to give it to Lion-O, even though he still sees him as a little kid. Lion-O, in reverse, has to sort of earn it from Panthro because he has a new status quo that everybody doesn't quite accept just yet. There's a mutual respect that comes through that trust, and then there's a development that happens that breaks trust, and that it will have a lasting impact on Lion-O. So all the characters are going through different things, and they've had to adapt since Thundera's destruction, but it all comes back to their ability to endure these constantly changing circumstances through the trust they have in each other, and that's where this issue really hits it hard. Taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture for new readers, if you're wondering what does this have to do with the original cartoon or any of the remakes, the answer is it doesn't. This closely resembles the original Thundercats cartoon, but an alternate or a revised take on it. Think of it as an alternate timeline where some of the things are a little bit different. Snarf is probably the most obviously different character in the cartoon, and some of the developments of what happens in the plot are slightly different, but not so different that it feels alien or strange, but it's definitely a different take. So think of it as an alternate version of the original cartoon. Final thoughts, what do we think about Thundercats number 4 from Dynamite Comics? This is the conclusion of the first arc, and you get a lot of first meetings, you get new alliances, you get painful betrayals. So from an emotional perspective and a sort of a drama perspective, there are some great developments here, and you get a lot of them. Declan Shelby definitely pours on a lot of emphasis and focus on relationship building. Unfortunately, that emphasis comes at the expense of pacing and excitement and action and adventure, which should be paramount in a Thundercats comic. Also, Drew Moss's art is serviceable, but it's an improvement over the previous issues. It's a little bit more energetic, a little bit more streamlined, not quite so blocky and static. Therefore, we're going to give Thundercats number 4 from Dynamite Comics a 6 out of 10. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Are you reading this series? Are you a Thundercats fan from the original? Are you liking how this comic takes a sort of a slightly different take on the original series? Or do you prefer the original and are not reading it? I just want to hear your general thoughts about what you think about this comic. Let us know in the comments section. Also, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned through the outro for the next review.